Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
The music you just heard is your signal to settle into your seats and prepare for the start of our worship service today. And before I begin, I have a few quick announcements. Well, maybe not so quick. I've been handed a few extras here. On June 2nd, there is a new membership. The membership team is hosting an orientation session from noon until 1:30 p.m. for everyone who would like to learn more about the Unitarian Universalism and the SGUUF. Childcare and lunch will be provided. Please sign up at the welcome table or RSVP to Clara. One other announcement that just came in, there is a special evening with singer-songwriter David Dersham and with special guest Lack Taylor and a few songs from your host, Judy Hume. That is on Sunday, May 19th at 6 p.m. Down at 505 West 8th Street in Georgetown. And Clara said that if anyone is interested, please stop by the table in the back and sign up for it ahead of time. Okay, and let's see, what else is going on? A new facilities team is being formed. And I think that's good for now. All of the announcements are on the handout. So if you didn't get one, please stop at the back and pick one up. Now, before we go on, Karina has a couple of announcements.
I won't be here during Joys and Sorrows, so I just wanted to share the happy news from the Bradstock family that they welcomed baby Felix this past week. And so if you would like to, I invite you to sign a card for them. It'll be at the back.
Nope. Good morning, and welcome to San Gabriel Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Whether you're here in the sanctuary or watching from home, we're glad you could join us. My name's Woody Hibbard. My pronouns are he, him, and I've been a member here at San Gabriel for 4 and a half years. In addition to serving as your lay leader, I've served on your board, and this year I'm working with Rob Bertold, Linda Hansen, and Beth Gershom on the nominating committee. So I probably irritated a few of you during the course of the year, but Rob will have an announcement in the next few weeks, in addition to serving as lay leader. Okay, San Gabriel is a member congregation of the Unitarian Universalist Association. There are over 1,000 congregations in the United States, all of which are working for a just, peaceful, and sustainable world. Sustaining each other here in this community is the first step down that long road of important work. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Eric Hepburn. I'm your pulpiteer. My pronouns are he, him. We especially welcome our guests today. If this is your first time here, thank you for coming. We hope that you'll stay afterwards for coffee and conversation, and I hope that you'll fill out a membership card and let us know who you are, why you're here, what you're searching for. Please know that whoever you are, wherever you are from, whomever you love, wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. Let us greet this day in song. Our opening hymn is Love Will Guide Us, number 131 in the gray hymnal. Lyrics will be projected. Please rise in body or spirit as you're able. As we light our chalice, we create sacred space together. I call you into this time of connection within, among, and beyond with the words of my maternal grandmother, Irma Baker, on card playing. If you're dealing and you're not winning, well, that's on you.
Our affirmation is an expression of our covenant with one another. Please read after me. The words will be projected. The doctrine of this church is love.
We are here to love.
The quest of truth is its sacrament.
We are here to learn.
Service is its prayer.
We are here to care for others.
To dwell together in peace.
We are here to live in peace.
To seek knowledge and freedom.
We are here to honor our differences.
To serve humanity and fellowship.
We are all connected in spirit.
To the end that all souls shall grow in harmony with the divine.
We are here to grow.
Thus we do covenant with one another.
This we promise to do together.
All right, now it's time for our Wonder Box. Karina? Oh, you're busy. But it's still time for the Wonder Box.
We'll play some more in a minute. Gotta do this first. We do have wondering minds, and we often feel that questions are more profound than answers, but with this wonder box, we like the answer. We like to know what's inside there. So we got guesses what might be in here? Kai, can you tell me what's in here? Sounds heavy. Any other thoughts before I open it up? Card? A book? You know, Eric said it last Sunday. So if you were here last Sunday, he said it because he knew what was going to be in here.
You mean he said one thing?
He said one thing. Ha ha ha. Ooh. Here you go. What is that? It's been in the Wonder Box before. Yay, Kai! Kai knew what it was. You want to hold the potato?
All right.
What does that make you think of? Potatoes. French fries. Yum. Potato salad. Sweet potatoes. Or something yummy. Let's see what our story is going to tell us about potatoes.
Today I am sharing an abridged version of Potatoes, Potatoes, written and illustrated by Anita Lobel, published by HarperCollins. Long ago there were two countries, one in the east, the other in the west, and one day they started a war with each other. In a valley between the countries lived a woman with two sons. She had a cow, some chickens, and a large potato field. To protect her potatoes and her boys from the war, she built a wall around everything she owned. The boys loved their mother and helped to plant, wheat, and harvest the potatoes. But they sometimes asked, "Why must we have a wall around us?" The mother said the potatoes would not grow if the winds from the east and the west blew on them. On cold nights, war battles raged all around, but they baked their potatoes in the fire and ate them. But the two sons grew up, and they saw the uniforms and the medals and the swords of the soldiers marching past and thought they were beautiful. The mother said she had seen uniforms tattered and stained with blood, metals rusting in the fields, and swords bent and broken. "Let's go inside for some nice potato pancakes," she said. But the boys said they were tired of potatoes and ran off, one to the east and one to the west. Left all alone, the woman cried bitterly. Then she bolted her door and went back to the potato field. The two sons liked being soldiers. They liked their new uniforms with swords and medals that gleamed. One became a general of the army in the east, and the other a commander in the army of the west. Many battles were fought. And yet afterwards, the brothers would often look down at their muddied uniforms, rusting medals, and bent swords, and think of their mother and feel sad. Still more battles were fought, emptying and burning the fields. Soon there was nothing left to eat in the east or the west. "We are hungry, we want food," the soldiers of each army cried. The brothers knew where there was food. So that night, the two armies marched toward the valley where the woman and the potatoes were. And the sons demanded of their mother, "My soldiers are hungry. Let us have some potatoes, and we shall fight for victory." But all they heard back from behind the wall was a stony silence. "Potatoes, potatoes, potatoes," the soldiers began to chant, and they crashed through the wall, and a furious battle for the potatoes began. Soon the house lay in ruins, the cow and chickens were gone, and the field was trampled. Many soldiers were moaning, and both brothers had been wounded. And behind a large pile of rubble, the woman lay on the ground, not moving. The brothers looked at their mother and all the broken things and began to weep. "Mother, mother, this is all our fault. What have we done? Speak to us," they begged. The soldiers, looking at their general and their commander, remembered their own mothers, and they also began to cry. But the woman was not dead. She did let everyone weep for a while. Then she opened her eyes, stood up, and said, "Even though you have ruined my house and my field, I still have enough potatoes in the cellar to feed all of you. But before I give you even one single peel, you must promise to stop all your fighting, clean up this mess, and go home to your mothers. We are so hungry and tired of fighting. We will do anything you say. Please let us have some potatoes." "Oh, mother," cried the sons, "you might have been killed. We are so happy you are not dead. Please forgive us." "Hooray for potatoes and hooray for mothers," shouted the soldiers when they had eaten and felt much better. Then they began to sing the songs their mothers had taught them, and that singing was heard in both the east and the west. All the mothers came and found their sons, falling into each other's arms. They returned to their homes in the east and the west, and the soldiers, they took off their uniforms. The two sons, well, they buried their swords and medals, and they helped their mother plant new potatoes in the field. They rebuilt their mother's house and mended the broken things. But they did not rebuild the wall. The end.
I think an 18-month-old got a lot of that story. He heard potatoes and hungry and a lot. Did you know that the very first Mother's Day was proposed by a Unitarian? Our UUA website tells us that in 1872, Unitarian Julia Ward Howe began advocating for the creation of a Mother's Day for Peace to be held on June 2nd each year, and you may recognize her as the author of the Battle Hymn of the Republic, and she was a leading suffragette of her time. As a mother, she was tired of war. She demanded a peaceful future for her children. The following year, 18 cities held such a gathering. and Bostonians continued to observe the day for more than a decade, while some cities continued the observance until the turn of the century, and then it died out. Ann Jarvis, a Methodist, was much more successful in 1907, and with the help of the YMCA, Mother's Day was established as a holiday by President Woodrow Wilson in 1914. Jarvis, however, was troubled by the commercialization of the day, saying, "I wanted it to be a day of sentiment, not profit." The history of Mother's Day reminds us that it is more than a day for flowers and pancakes, although we love those things. It is a call to honor the value of every human life, as if you were the one who had given birth to that life, as if you were the one who had cradled and fed and diapered and taught that precious little one into being. So glad I got to share that news earlier. This makes it even more poignant. Let us celebrate the tenacity of women and all who mother, all people who, like the mother in the story, struggle for justice and for the conditions that all families need to thrive in our time together. Kai and I and Hush and maybe Mr. Spoon. We're going to talk more about how we can care for one another and for those who care for us. Are we ready to go? We'll go.
Happy Mother's Day. In our story this morning, we saw a glimpse of what I want to dig into today. We saw a mother doing her best in a difficult situation, making decisions that she hoped would protect her children, decisions that ultimately produced the very conditions she was hoping to avoid. However, her love and her caring ultimately came home to roost as her sons grew into their own wisdom. As Karina mentioned, Mother's Day grew out of a history of two American Civil War matriarchs in Appalachia, Anne Reeves Jarvis and Julia Ward Howe. They were early feminists looking to provide women with better lives and to end the horrors of war. The federal holiday, championed by Anne's daughter Anna M. Jarvis, centered the honoring of mothers, and especially her own mother, discarding the anti-war aspect. So again, we are drawn into this observation with which we struggled last month, the distinction between deep esoteric religion and shallow exoteric religion. I would argue that using reflections on motherhood and by mothers as an interrogation of the human condition and as a healing unguent for the causes of war, or as a well of deep gratitude for the gift of life and for those who labor to deliver that gift, well, those are pretty deep. But humankind's predilection for the exoteric has made of Mother's Day another excuse for buying cut flowers and gifts. Another saccharine feel-good bromide where pro forma gratitude replaces deep reflection and any acknowledgement of indebtedness. Don't get me wrong, I think that shallow gratitude is a significant improvement over no gratitude, and major improvement over being taken for granted. But I'm not here in this pulpit to improve your bromide supply. I'm here to invite you deeper into the work of being human. That is my calling, and I'm inviting you to discover yours. With that background in mind, let's get to the title of today's sermon, Mothers Lost, Mothers Found. I'm going to share with you stories of 4 generations of mothers in my family, all of them lost, all of them deceased, all of them known personally by me. Through this storytelling, I am hoping to find them again in the spirit of Orson Scott Card's beautiful concept of a speaker for the dead. I hope to tell you some truths about their lives that, while they may be hard to hear, honor them as human beings, as women who did the best that they could with what they had, as mothers, as daughters, as sisters, as siblings, about how their best intentions sometimes went sideways, about how they sometimes didn't recover from adversity. And in the end, I hope, an invitation to deep lessons that we can take away from their stories, lessons to help us heal ourselves, heal our families, our communities, and indeed the whole world. Let's get started. The earliest generation of my matrilineage that I knew personally was my great-grandmother, Lorraine Kane. Now, as great-grandmothers are prone to be, even to their eldest great-grandchildren, which I was, mine was already old when I was born, and was older still by the time I got old enough to remember her. She died when I was about 14, but not before I got to spend back-to-back summers in church with her when I was 12 and 13. I was first saved in a free will Pentecostal church that summer when I was 12, a church whose pastor was her youngest son, and my great-uncle Wilbur, though we all called him Webb. But my most powerful memory of her was this: at the age of 13, I received the gift of healing in my church. And for those skeptics out there, I do mean faith healing. And as is customary upon such occasions, the pastor asked if anyone in the church was afflicted. Well, my great-grandmother raised her hand and said that she'd had a headache for 2 days that she just couldn't get rid of. So she stepped up to the pulpit, and I laid hands on her, and I prayed hard for her well-being and for her to get some relief from this pain. And when she stepped back, she testified that the pain was gone, and she praised Jesus for the healing. Well, I was relieved, but still in part of my mind skeptical too. So I casually cajoled my grandfather into bringing me around to her house later in the week, which was in the next town over, and I gently asked my great-grandmother if she was for real, if her headache had really gone away. She looked at me, surprised at first, and then with a look of gentleness, and she said that it had gone away and it hadn't come back yet. A few weeks later, she confided in me that the relief had lasted 2 whole weeks before she even had to take her pain meds again. I was happy for her. I was even more happy that she seemed to be proud of me. And mostly, I tried not to be too incredulous or skeptical, which even then I recognized as something that short-circuits whatever gratitude we can muster in this life. She died the next year, and I never saw her again after that summer. Let's move forward now 1 generation. Our chalice lighting words this morning came from my maternal grandmother, Irma Jean Baker. If you're dealing and you're not winning, that's on you. Now, I played poker weekly for about 18 years before the pandemic ended our habit. And when I'd share this tidbit with my fellow players, it never failed to get both a laugh and a look of incredulity. Your grandma used to say that? It just doesn't fit in with most people's stereotypes of a grandmother. Well, that was my grandmother too. There were a number of stereotypes that just didn't fit her. Now, there were also a number of stereotypes that she did fit. Stories I could tell you of her teaching Sunday school or helping out neighbors in a pinch with money or free childcare. But I think y'all are beginning to know me better than that. Everybody in my family will tell you those stories. Everyone likes telling the stories that support and bolster what they want, sometimes what they need to believe. But I'm more interested not in the salacious or defamatory, but I am more interested in the stories that help us grapple with the transmission of intergenerational trauma that keeps us stuck in not having a page 4 of the sermon. I just want to thank God and Jesus and von Neumann for the digital revolution. Please hold, data is downloading. Now, maybe if I was a better minister, I would just wing this part, but I'm not even going to try. Well, I said that. I know what it says, and y'all are going to know exactly what it says when the podcast drops on Monday. All right. I am interested in the transmission of intergenerational trauma, and so I have to tell you this story. I have to tell you the story about how my grandmother was the eldest of 9 children, growing up in an alcoholic rural household. I have to tell you that my great-grandmother, according to the stories of my grandmother, as a young woman and a young mother, was a drinker and a carouser and a fierce card player and a sore loser. So once my grandmother was old enough to hold a deck of cards, she got wrangled in whenever they needed a fourth. My great-grandmother would pair with whoever happened to come by, neighbor, relative, and my grandmother would be paired with her father, Archie. Now, the instructions from her father were these. We can't win, but you have to look like you're trying. Now, I just want to take a minute to reflect. This was the hardest page in the sermon, so I'm sad not to have it with me, but it's the hardest emotionally because there's a truth that I need you to hear. And maybe the Spirit, whatever that means, left that page out so that I'd have to struggle with it in person with y'all. But my grandmother died last November, and I have had a difficult time mourning her death. Partly because she had become angry and bitter and brittle in her old age. So it's been hard for me to mourn the woman who, the last time we visited her, literally screamed at my wife for misplaying a card in a friendly game of canasta. That's been hard. But when I was writing this story, I was able to grieve her deeply for the first time, because I was able to look past that woman and see that little girl put in an impossible situation between a rock and a drunk, hard place of having to learn how to play cards so well that you could look like you were trying to win and still fail. You might have to be a long-time card player like I am to realize just what an impossible assignment that is. And to have to be put in that situation where you cannot win and you are not allowed to win over and over and over again. Well, when I was able to see that, I was able to see that little girl inside my grandmother. And I was able to grieve for that little girl. And I was able to see how not healing from that calcified into the thing that my grandmother became. I had another insight when I was writing this, and that insight was this. One of the things that's always troubled me about my grandmother, one of the things I never could understand, and I've talked to her siblings and they couldn't understand. I don't know, and I've never met many people in life who could not find joy in music, but my grandmother was one. And a memory flashed to me while I was writing this of her making an offhand comment about them playing the radio at the card games. And I thought, how deep must that trauma have been of those nights for them to rob her of access to two of the greatest sources of joy in human life, games and music. And I was able to weep for her then. Because no little girl deserves that. And when that sort of thing happens, some folks never recover. So it's time to jump again, back to the script. Another generation to my own mother, Sherry O'Brien. She was the eldest child of an eldest child, which makes me the eldest child times 3. And if that isn't a recipe for type A behavior, I don't know what is. So it was with my mom. Despite dropping out of high school to give birth to me, and despite having no college education to speak of, she was, by the time I was in college, had worked herself from the secretarial pool all the way up to being one of a handful of senior executive secretaries at the Kennedy Space Center. And while I was in college, her boss, the senior vice president of something or other, decided to retire. And his gratitude for my mother and all the ways that she had helped him and made him successful at his job was such that he told her, "You need to put your talents to work for yourself, not just making men like me look good." Now, for the 1990s, that was some pretty solid feminist allyship. So he helped her identify some jobs that fit her skills, and he advocated for her, and she landed a big promotion. She became the head of logistics for the Space Shuttle landing team. And it wasn't just a gift, it was an acknowledgement of her intelligence, both emotional and intellectual. It was an acknowledgement of her hard work and her ability to get things done. In a few years after she got that promotion, there was an accident, and the Space Shuttle Columbia disintegrated on re-entry, spreading debris across the southeastern United States. It was a landing gone wrong, and my mother's team had a new job. A huge multi-month search party was organized that covered parts of 5 states, including Texas, and whose mission it was to recover every bit of that debris from the accident that could be recovered. And my mom ended up running logistics for that. From warehouses to rental cars to hotels to flights to transport to reassembly. The weight of the Columbia recovery effort landed on her desk, and she handled it. She won a prestigious manned spaceflight award for her work on that project. Don't say I didn't give you any happy stories. But as you might suspect, there's a dark thread in this pattern that I have to reveal. On the day that she received that promotion, a day when I'm sure she was plagued by the same imposter syndrome that haunts many of us when we take on a new challenge, on a day that she was filled with pride and excitement and a fair portion of fear, she went to tell her mother, Irma. She hoped for congratulations. She hoped for pride or approval. She hoped for support, and what she got was this, quote, "I hope you haven't bitten off more than you can chew," end quote. She called me in angry tears that night. And that's been hard to forgive. Look, folks, I've been a devout feminist since the early 90s. You can thank my first wife for that. I do. But what I want to talk about today, what's calling this sermon forth from me, is the observation from within my own family of what I can only call woman-to-woman misogyny. This is not to give men or patriarchy or any other misogynist current a pass of any kind, but it is to notice that some significant portion of the cultural oppression of women is propagated by women against each other. And I say this also because I have faith that women can and will answer the call to end this misogyny, the call to heal, the call back into right relationship, mother to daughter, daughter to mother, sister to sister, sibling to sibling. I wish that my family was an outlier outlier, a big exception, in a world where women are united in solidarity against their own oppression. Sadly, this is no more true in feminism than it is in anti-racism work or with any other oppressed group that I have studied. Let me be clear. I am not calling out my great-grandmother, and I'm not calling out my grandmother. I'm not shaming them or blaming them. I am telling their story as honestly, earnestly, cogently, and compassionately as I can because I wish to learn from it, and because I wish to heal from it, and because I wish that learning and that healing for you. Will it be enough listening to my story? I don't know. You may have to find your own story of that, or your mother or your mother's mother, and you may have to sift that story for hard truths and tiny cracks that might let the light and compassion seep in. Maybe. Who knows? There are more stories. 4 years after Challenger, they found that my mother's had brain cancer, stage 4. 2 years later, just 6 weeks before Christy and I adopted our son Simon, she died. I have 2 younger sisters, one born when I was 8, Kelly, and the other born when I was 12, Aaron. Since I was significantly older and since I started working while going to school at age 15 and since I moved away to college when I was 17, I didn't spend a lot of childhood time with my sisters. I feel like I was, for them, that almost mythological older brother who rolls into town for Christmas on his motorcycle, which I did a few times. But I assumed, partly because I didn't pay attention or enough attention or the right kind of attention, and partly because I wasn't there, but anyway, I assumed that they had received from our mother the same kinds of things that I had received from her, at least in terms of the things I was grateful for. My mother loved me unconditionally, and she expressed that love frequently and intensely and earnestly. My mother had faith and confidence in me, supported me, believed in me, in my ability to be anything I wanted to be, and she expressed that support frequently and earnestly, and often at times when I needed it the most. Of course, I thought, from my position of eldest born male child privilege, of course my mother would unconditionally love my sisters in the same way she had me. Of course she would support them and believe in them the same way she had for me. In hindsight, I can't believe how long I was able to sustain this fiction. The evidence was there early on. You see, when I was young, say first grade, I fell behind in reading. I just wasn't getting it like the other kids, whatever it was. And when the teachers brought it to my parents, they insisted that I get extra help, and I did. And they insisted that I get tested for the gifted program because they thought that my exceptionalness was being misinterpreted as a learning problem. So I got tested, and I got tutored, and I didn't get held back a grade. And I did get put into that gifted program, which was a tremendous relief, 1 day a week from the normal tedium of grade school. And so it went with me through grade school and high school and college and graduate school on the honors track, on the smart track, on the going somewhere track. And just like any adolescent would, I gave myself full credit for all of it. Now, when my sisters were in a similar situation, early school, struggling a bit for reasons no one could quite put a finger on, something different happened. There was no, maybe they're too smart for that classroom, maybe they're bored. There was no advocacy, no gifted testing. I remember arguing with my parents about it. I remember saying it was a mistake. I hadn't yet studied how tracking works in school systems, but I knew intuitively that this decision would last almost forever. I knew it was wrong. I knew that my sisters deserved the same benefit of the doubt, the same unrelenting advocacy that I had gotten, but they were denied. They were, each of them, 4 years apart, held back a grade, tracked into the not honors group, the not so smart track, the not going anywhere track. My sister Kelly didn't make it through high school. At 14, she ran away from home, out of state. She was gone for 2 years before we heard from her. For many years, if the phone rang in the night, my first thought was that her luck had run out. She struggled with addiction. She had a daughter, Chloe, who is graduating from high school in 2 weeks. She placed a few more kids through adoption. Chloe was raised by my mother and stepfather for a bit, and then by her father for a decade or so, and then by my grandmother, Irma, until she died last year. My sister Kelly was the kind of mother they tell cautionary tales about. The kind of daughter who wasn't welcome at my mother's deathbed because my mother just couldn't take another dose of heartbreak. The kind of sister you want to help but can't figure out how. The kind you keep wishing will get clean and stay clean long enough that she might get used to it, might finally find a way out of that maze she wandered into too young. But that didn't happen for her. A little over 2 years ago, the call I had long feared finally came. She'd run out of luck and died of a fentanyl overdose. She was 40 years old. I went to Florida to deliver her eulogy, as I had done for my mother. I refused to play the game that some in the family wanted, the one where we pretended she wasn't an addict, the one where we pretended she hadn't died of an overdose. I delivered a powerful and honest eulogy. It brought most of the assembled to racking sobs. I felt I had done my work, but it wasn't the greatest blessing that day, not even close. As you can imagine, given what I've shared about my sister, I didn't think much of her friends and companions. She had a friend, Larry Pacharek, who, from what I could tell, did his best to be a good friend to my sister, and as is the tendency with protective older brothers, I was wary of this older man's interest in my younger sister. Larry died about a year before Kelly, and Larry's sister was at my sister's memorial, and she came up to me afterwards and said this: "That's the second best eulogy I've ever seen. But the one your sister did for my brother was better." She then went on to describe, as best she could through her own tears, the renditions of Shakespeare that my sister wove together for her friend Larry in remembrance of him. I didn't even know that my sister knew Shakespeare or liked it. Half less that she had committed enough of it to memory to perform it unscripted and interwoven in honor of her friend. That was the blessing. That was the hard lesson. The demolition of any residual doubt that my sister Kelly had deserved any less advocacy and faith in her early years than I had received. She was a human miracle who couldn't live with the diminished expectations the world had of her. On the second anniversary of her death, just this past spring, my living sister Erin and I met at a cabin in the woods. And for the first time in our lives, as adults or children, it was just the two of us. In a world made smaller by the deaths of so many mothers we had loved. We gathered, dedicating some time and attention to strengthening our own relationship, remembering together the people and situations we had lived through. In our conversations that weekend, what I had suspected and should have known was made clear. If my inheritance from my mother had been unconditional love and unconditional faith, my sisters, both of them, had only received half of that inheritance. I asked, "Didn't Mom used to tell you, as she did me, that you could do or be anything you wanted to be?" "No," my sister answered. Mom would look at me with a bit of pity in her eyes and say, "Sorry, sis, but your brother got all the brains." The stories we tell matter, not least because we believe them. Now, I won't tell you the story of my sister Erin. She is alive and well, and her story is hers to tell. I'll confine myself to this. She has also proven in recent years beyond any shadow of a doubt that she should have been granted the same unconditional support in her youth that I received. I'm proud that she is also a human miracle, one who's figured out how to defy the world's diminished expectations of her. Nor can I tell you the stories of my nieces Chloe and Kaylee, who are still just writing the first chapters of their own stories. But what I hope for these women in my matrilineage, this mother, these two daughters, is that they will hear these stories I've shared today, that they will be the generations that break the cycle of trauma and misogyny in my family, and that the next generations of women in my family and beyond will stand together. Mothers, daughters, and siblings united in unconditional love, in unconditional support of one another, free from the toxic influence of misogyny, and free from every type of dehumanization. May it be so. We'll pause here. Take a moment for reflection on what we've just heard. I'm going to invite Woody to come up and grab the mic. Learning to give each other the gift of attention as we share joys and sorrows, gratitudes and concerns is one of the things we are here to learn, and it is among the most important. So I invite you now to share if you're willing, but to listen nonetheless. All right, I was moved by the Spirit to start a new Joys and Concerns practice. So worship's a weird thing, right? Like there are these weird ceremonial aspects. Some of them are like on the radar, some of them are off the radar. We're going to try this for a little while. I've heard that we thought dropping the stones in water was maybe not working. I tried dropping them in a bowl last week. That's not working. But this week, here's what I think we're going to try. During Joys and Concerns, my job as your pulpiteer and civil engineer is to make a cairn with a stone of each joy and concern, and we'll leave that cairn up until the beginning of the next Sunday service. So it'll stand as your memories resonate with your fellows and congregants throughout the week. That cairn will be there as a reminder and hold space for that until we're together to share again. We'll try that for a little while, see how that plays. Thank you for sharing. I just want you to recognize that if you gave the people who spoke today your undivided attention, you probably felt a little thread connect you to them. You learned a little something about them that you didn't know before, a little something that resonated with one of your own life experiences or helped you extend a tentacle of love or empathy or compassion or understanding towards where they've been and what they've done and seen and how they shared their story with you. And those little threads add up to the fabric of our community. That's how important the opportunity to listen to one another is. As a meditation, let us sing together Spirit of Life, number 123 from the Gray Hymnal. Please, once again, rise in body and spirit as you're able.
We take an offering each week to sustain this space we call home and to support the work of our fellowship. Now, please, if this is your first time here, please feel free to let that plate pass you by. Your presence is your gift to us this morning. For our offertory music, Gene is going to play The Gift of Love by Hal H. Hobson, and the offering will now be gratefully received. Thank you.
I had different words written to extinguish the chalice, but something that didn't make it into the page that was missing, or I should say, made it into the page but not out of my mouth, is on my heart, and I want to share that with you instead. One of the hardest parts for me of writing today's sermon was discerning between unconditional love and unconditional support, and realizing that they are not the same thing. One of the things I am still to this day grateful for about my grandmother, Irma, is that we did have unconditional love for one another, even at times when we didn't approve of each other very much. And that unconditional love made it possible for us to be together and to spend time together, even without the approval. And I'm grateful for that.
Okay, thanks again to Gene Olson, our hospitality team, our greeters, and our tech team for helping create our time together today. And a special thank you to our pulpiteer. Very good, Eric. And don't forget to check your Sunday handout in the back. It has several announcements on it that I didn't mention at the beginning, and it'll keep you up to speed here. So let us greet each other now, and please join us together for coffee in Mark's room. Thank you. Happy Mother's Day.
Oh, I'm going to make a dumb announcement. See, this is an aspiritual announcement. This is an aspiritual announcement. Some of you know that I was a technology nerd before I came to this job, and I couldn't stand that the Wi-Fi across the campus didn't work right, so it's fixed now. So there are QR codes back at the table. We'll have QR codes posted around the buildings, but you can scan the QR code. It'll add the new SGUUF Wi-Fi network to your phone, and no matter where you're at in the 3 buildings, you should have outstanding signal. I really thought, now Molly, I thought that the problem of how to use a QR code had been solved for me by the pandemic, but I could be mistaken. No, I heard some groaning that misunderstood my comment. So for people like me who have been in academia for a long time, QR codes have been a thing for like 15 years. But the only people who used them were like library sciences people who would put them up on their exhibits, and then people would stare at them and be like, I don't know what that is. So like the pandemic really changed the landscape for QR codes. Like most people now know what a QR code is, and they're like, all right, that's enough of that. We're done. Go have coffee.